I'm just passing the presentation to you.
Okay, are we ready?
Yep.
Good
luck.
afternoon to you, and I will try and speak very slowly because unfortunately my Hebrew leaves a lot to be desired. My topic today is SQL Server Reporting Services 2016 on steroids. Unfortunately, the sound is not good on, or the microphone is not working on another laptop where I have the demonstration. Everything will go wrong when you're doing a presentation. So the practical presentations are going to be just slides for this morning's presentation or this afternoon's presentation. It's 11 o'clock here in the East in New York. All right, let's get going. My name is Steve Simon. I'm a SQL Server MVP. I work for Atrion Networking Corporation in Providence, Rhode Island. Been involved in database design for 29 years and plus. I've done a couple of presentations at the PASS summits. I do a lot of SQL Saturdays in the Northeast, etc. And I do a lot of contributions to SQLshack.com. You know, if you think about it, a lot of us are either in the DBA aspect or a lot of us are in the business intelligence. And the problem is we never really get to do the other chores. If you're a DBA, you very rarely get a chance to do presentations with regards to business intelligence and vice versa. So if you want some good articles on business intelligence, do drop by SQL Shack and pick up some of them. I think I've got about 38 articles out there. Okay. A little bit about myself, and then we'll get down to business. I've given you the SQLshack.com article. My LinkedIn is Stephen R. Simon. Twitter, SQL Server Boffin. And if you want to get hold of me, you can get hold of me at steve.simon@sqlpass.org. Now, excuse me, I'll be posting all the code that you should have seen today up on my website, which is InfoGold USA, one word, InfoGold, INFOGOLD-USA.com. And you can pick up all the code. It's all operational. I'll have it up there before the end of the day today, New York time. And I've got a couple of blogs at SQLServerCentral.com. All right. The agenda that we're going to have a look at today is we're going to have a look, first of all, and start off at the beginning with baby steps, which is SSRS, relational queries with SQL Server 2016, which is something that, you know, that is just basically a basic type of thing that you're going to do on an average daily basis. Simple select, whatever it may be. Then what we're going to do is we're going to have a look at some multidimensional queries with SQL Server MDX 2016. But the good part's yet to come. We're then going to have a look at some queries that have been written to work against the tabular model with MDX, multidimensional expressions. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take tabular queries to that as well. And then what we're going to do finally is have a look at some of the data mining queries with SQL Server, reporting services, and DMX. Pardon me. Okay. Now, the kicker, the important point is that what we're going to do is we're going to use T-SQL instead of using MDX, DMX, and DAX as the main programming language. Now, there's method behind my madness. There really is. I don't think that any of you that are out there listening really enjoy working with MDX because of its complexity, and you're not able to make it do the things that we can do with standard T-SQL. So I'm proposing this to you. Let's assume that you took a piece of MDX code, which is the multidimensional expression which we use in analysis services, and you were to put a bun, let's call it a hamburger or a chicken burger that you get at McDavid's. Now, we have two buns, one on the bottom and one on the top, to cover the burger, which are done with standard T-SQL. Now, that type of thing is phenomenal because of the fact that what I can now do is I can now use all sorts of case logic in my predicate, And I can also convert a lot of the stuff and do a lot of fancy things that is not that easy to achieve with MDX. Okay? Now we're going to do that through a linked server and Openquery. All right. We're going to start off with MDX and Contoso. Here's a simple query that's done with a simple piece of MDX. And you can see that I get the results out of here. And I think that it's, pretty simple. There's nothing earth-shattering. It's not a PhD thesis. And you can see how you can get your results out. Now, if I create a linked server, in other words, using the master file, master database, and execute sp_added LinkedIn server, and I give the name of the server, give a name for my linked server, I give the provider, the name of my data source, and the catalog that I'm using, I can create a linked server. Here's a piece of that code, the hamburger code that you get at McDavid's. You'll notice that the top portion to the Openquery point is a piece of T-SQL. Notice that the code in red is a standard piece of MDX code. Now, what happens is that your linked server that we created in the slide before acts as a viaduct to get the data that we need out and permits us to use standard T-SQL, etc. Now, an example. Not bad. Here's one of my favorites. Sorry, Maria, can you see the notepad, the open notepad screen?
Yes, we can see it.
Perfect. Here's an example. I just want you to watch this. How many times have you had 3 parameters that have been set? In other words, on a report, in other words, country, city, and township, or whatever you want. And it's sometimes difficult to get the thing blank. In other words, if you want to just select the country and you want to set the township, but you don't care what city it's in because you're looking for it for some reason, okay? You've got an issue because you can't leave the second one or the middle one blank because what's interpreted by SQL Server is null. And there are no null values. Now, where I'm going with this one is here. If I go and type in the following, where 1 equals when amper my var equals all, then 1, oh, sorry, forgive me, don't know my own strength, and put this here. I am going somewhere with this, else 2, or field 1, predicate field equals amper my var. Okay. This is a type of thing that would be very difficult to do within a piece of MDX code, but yet you can do with the method I've shown. Now, quickly to parse it, as I'm sure you know, if the thing is all, then 1 is going to be equal to 1, which means that the record's going to be able to be passed through. Otherwise, it'll come 2, forcing the parsing of the second clause, which the predicate field is equal to the variable that's been passed. Now, I use this in almost every single report because I got fussy users, and this thing works like a bomb. Now, that piece of code could go in at the bottom just underneath the A because the black code on the top, which is the top of the McDavid's burger, will then reflect, basically pull the data from the subquery that you've got over here. And once it's pulled the data, use the clause that I've just shown you as the predicate. And this type of thing is very, very difficult to try and achieve using MDX code. Okay, moving on. Now, the one problem that you have with using this particular method is that regardless of what the format is, excuse me, of the actual code within the MDX cube, your issue with drawing this as a report, and I'll show you, we're going to see a hands-on, we'll see a report in a couple of minutes' time. Your issue is that this comes out of a var chart, in var chart, this being what is actually being passed through. So this got me at first. This really did, because I tried to do mathematics on it and it went eh. So therefore, you have to remember that when we actually use this in the report, you want to use computations on the thing, that has got to be converted into an integer format. And normally what I try and do in this case, since I'm dealing with millions of dollars, I try and put it into the big int. All right? Now, here is the query. The same query that I've got. I've got a procedure that runs a report, and we'll see the report in a minute. Okay. Here, what you've got is you've got the basic fields in the top over here. Oh, don't know my own string. Okay. And you've got the conversion to the big int, running through the query, running through the funnel, and pulling out the data from the piece of MDX code. Now, if you convert that and make that your data source, this is what you get as far as the report comes out. It's an ordering matrix. You can see there's a whole pile of countries, a certain amount of sales amounts in Israeli shekels, etc. And you get the call inventory, etc. on hand, which I think is actually quite cool. All right. Now, the kicker, and this is the most important part. What happens if you want to add parameters to it? For instance, country. For instance, city. This type of thing is also very difficult within trying to do this within a piece of MDX code for Contoso. This is what the report looks like that I would have liked to show you. I'll have the code up on the site, as I say, before close of business New York time. InfoGold, once again, infogoldusa.com. You'll notice in here that I've got a continent that gets pulled out, and then I've got country, which you can see the drop-down box on. Now, you're going to say, well, what does this do? How do we do this? How do we tie this in? What you're going to do is you've got that query that we looked at in the background where you had the hamburger or the chicken burger from McDavid's. And what you did was you put in parameters at the top of the screen. In other words, you have parameters receiving into the stored procedure. And these parameters are being passed in when you click View Report. Okay? So that when you actually view the report, that's what you'll end up getting. Okay? Now, let me just try and see if I can do something here for the sake of argument. They've gone and changed the names of the servers on me. Hang on. Stored procedures. I wonder if I've got this in New York. If I haven't got this stored outside a SQL Server, I'll do it. I'll have the stuff up there for you. No, I don't seem to have the query here. All right, just going back there to the presentation. The query will be up there. It'll be, everything is there. You should be able to play it. All right. Now, we've been looking at, up until now, what we've been doing is we've been looking at just a standard piece of MDX code against an analytical services database with multidimensional results. Where we want to go now is we want to basically look at a presentation using the tabular model. Now, before we go any further, I work a lot with the finance people at our organization, and somehow I think, if you think about it, many people in the financial world prefer to work with spreadsheets because of the fact that it makes more sense to them. We have managed to get a tremendous amount of buy-in using the tabular model and using DAX, which I'm going to show you in a couple of minutes' time, to be able to present this type of thing to the user. Now, if you look at the bottom, I've got a couple of summary fields at the bottom. How those are calculated is beyond the scope of this presentation. But what it does is it actually totals up all the values that you can see in revenue and in total cost. Now, here's the beauty of the whole thing. It's not just a simple summing. What it's doing is it's actually summing up by 3 or 4 different fields. So in fact, what it's doing is it's grouping when you use it in a piece of Power BI. So it's got those connections in Power BI that it can show you a detailed breakdown in a hierarchy format, which is actually very, very nice. And that's another presentation that I hope to do at some particular stage for you. All right, now if I move on, I once again created a link server to this database, which is actually part of the New York presentation that I did. And this is actually scripted from within SQL Server. You can see it comes out from the 380 SQL Server there, database rather. And moving on, here is the query code. This is what I wanted to get at. Now, when you are passing through multiple parameters, you've got one particular issue that you've got. In other words, if I want to look at New York, I want to look at, or let's bring in your concept, Tel Aviv, Haifa, Jerusalem, Beersheba, any of these particular places. The problem is that what's happened, reporting services basically passes that string through, which is a comma delimited string. So what you've got to do is you've got to write a little routine that what it does is it looks for the char index of the comma and splits the thing into small little strings and iterates through until it gets to the end of the string. Now, when it goes through this particular piece of code, what it does is it does a check to see whether or not the string of code is finished yet. If not, what it does is it strips off the first left-hand characters all the way to the first comma that it finds. And then what it does is it inserts the data into the temporary table variable, okay, and then shortens the string. Now, the question I ask you is this. Why a table variable as opposed to a using a dynamic, just gave it away, instead of using a temporary table? And the obvious answer is that everything is basically parsed in memory, and it's also easier to create. You don't have to start creating temporary tables, and it'll essentially put that in. And what'll happen is at the end of the point over here, if you can see over here, it's got there, it says select city, add city, I'll back up again, sorry. City, add city into hashtag city, which is the one table that I make from the table var. Now, what it's then doing is it's moving the stuff from the table variable into a temporary table. Now you're going to say to me, well, hey, whoa. What you did was you told me that I should not be using a temporary table and I should only be using the table variable. All right, the issue is this. The table variable exists only as long as you have not issued a go statement. If you issue a go statement, everything in memory is destroyed to that point as far as table variables go. Therefore, I'm persisting it for want of a better word. Now, what happens is, now, here's the kicker. I've got about 3 cities, right? Now, you might say to me, why go through all this? Why not just basically say when you write your query, if you look at the very last line of code, what you'll see is I've joined the piece of code at the end, in other words, the bottom bun of the hamburger, I've joined it to the temp table by an inner join. Now, this is in effect acting as a filter. Now, you're going to say, well, why not say where the city is in? Well, you're going to have some idiot who is going to try and put in 2,000 cities or 3,000 cities, and guess what? Or once you go over 1,000 ins, in other words, where city in, and you go over 1,000, the thing aborts. Not 1024, but 1,000. If you don't believe me, go and try it. But by joining it, by inner join to the list of cities that has been given, you're basically speaking, doing the same thing as creating a predicate with a where clause. And that's the way we handle that particular thing. Now, moving on, if you look at this particular query, that's what it draws out of the dynamic table, out of the out of the tabular model, and you can see there the results coming down. If I go and issue the query straight within our tabular model, once again using a piece of MDX code. So MDX code works for the tabular model, but ideally what we eventually want to do is we want to get out of using MDX and go towards DAX, because there's a lot of cool things that you can do with DAX. Okay? So controlling the predicate, that once again getting away from your from the screen that I showed you before, you can see highlighted there's where the inner join is done to be able to connect to that piece of code and make it run. And if I run the report, there you can see all the columns come through either as a matrix or as a chart. And I've basically speaking selected it. And if you look at the top where it says city, you can see that what is being passed through from the selection box to the query is one string, which is Boston, comma, Detroit, comma, Los Angeles, comma, etc. So you really have to be able to split that string in order to be able to make it work. Okay. All right. Now here's the beauty. I love working with DAX. It is a phenomenally powerful language to use. You can use it both in SQL Server or reporting services, etc. But you can also use it within Excel. And let's be honest, there are still a lot of people using Excel. Now, one of the things that I love the most about working with DAX is that there are a lot of routines that don't exist within MDX nor within SQL Server itself that you will have to construct. I'll give you an example. There is a particular function that is within the DAX world that is called same period last year, which means that it will take the date and automatically subtract 1 year, 1 day, whatever it may be, the same period last year. It could be a quarter, it could be whatever you want, and it does the calculation. So in other words, it would show March the 14th of this year if you did it on a daily basis, and March the 14th of last year, so that users can see exactly how their businesses compared to the same day to year, etc., going forward. And this is very, very powerful stuff. It really is. Now, here's the kicker. This is not me trying to set up. Okay, I had a piece of code that I had evaluated, okay? And I went to go and put it in as text because that's the way you normally do the type of thing. Now, you would think that you would be able to do that. Well, no. Microsoft, in their infinite wisdom, and I say this tongue-in-cheek, have created such an extent that you cannot just go and plop that code within the text box. It will not take the code. What you have to do in order to do that is click the designer, the query designer, and go into the query designer and set it up so that it runs as a data mining query. Go figure. There is no logical reason for this thing or anything else like that, but that's what has to be done. Otherwise, you cannot get that code in there, catch 22. Now, that's just by and by. The other thing that you want is the customers, in other words, customer names that are being passed through. You have to use a different type of logic. You can't use the same logic that I showed you for the MDX code if you're going to do it straight without using a linked query. Because I had to show you something that was basically speaking not using a linked query. So what I have in this example is I've been using a class contains, and I'm substituting curly brackets and commas, etc., to pull a list of customer names. That string will be passed through to the query, and from that, the query will return the data set. Okay. Unfortunately, I was going to show a demo here, etc. That's very difficult to do. All right. Moving forward, what I want to do is I want to show you how you can use linked servers to basically speaking pull dashboard data. All right. Now, let's see if I can salvage this one. Okay. Toolbox. I updated my work computer, and this is a hassle. But in any case, what you've got here is you're using another SQL Server piece of code, and let's see if I've got a copy here somewhere. Code. All right, let's just close it down. Cancel. Quit. All right. Let's go back here. All right. What is actually happening behind the scenes at this particular point in time is that there is a piece of MDX code underneath here that you can see in the stuff. Bear with me. Let's try this. Just give me one minute. There's the report data. Now, you see I haven't got the report data here. What I need because it's not connected to the database server. All right. There's a piece of MDX query, DMX query here, data mining expression, and that particular data mining expression has got a piece of DMX code in behind it. Now, that being said, okay, what we do want to do is we want to be able to use a standard piece of SQL on that thing, and we do a piece of SQL on it with the hamburger method again by selecting it and once again using an Openquery and doing a couple of calculations in there that you can use all sorts of icons on to be able to pull the values out and start using colorful little tools, etc., to be able to go ahead and this one. Right? Okay. Now, I did want to bring this into you, sorry. This one here is from the only thing that you're going to gain out of it. For those of you who have worked with reporting services, one of the nagging little aggravations of reporting services is that you know that you go and change the data
Steve, can you
in the
hear me?
database.
Steve,
And you come back. Is there a question?
can you hear me?
Yeah.
The sound is very bad. You did something in the beginning of the session to make it clearer. Probably maybe just get closer to the microphone because I can hear you very badly.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Can you hear me now?
Say something?
Hear me?
Badly.
Okay, because I haven't done anything to the sound. I'll talk louder. How's that?
And the echo, echo is back. Yeah, it's just whatever, the best as you can, you know.
Okay, Mom, I am almost finished.
All right.
Okay.
Okay.
One of the nagging things that occurs with reporting services is that data is persisted in reporting services until you clear the cache. You may change data in your database table and run the report and not find the changes. So one of the things that I have done is I found this little article by Jason Faulkner that clears the reporting services cache. Now, if I go in here and I go up to tools, you'll see that I've got an option on the tools called Clear Reporting Data Cache. You'll be able to use this thing if you follow the quick instructions that he's got, which will clear out all the cache for you so that you can draw fresh data from there. Okay? JasonFaulkner.com. Ways. If the query is simple, perhaps nothing more is required than to be able to do a simple query. Simple T-SQL query that could get you anything you want. Linked servers and SQL kits really provide a certain amount of flexibility. And I prefer to use these particular predicates because I can able to do a lot more fancy things without having to work with either DMX, MDX, or DAX. Because DAX will work too as a link query. So we saw applied to everything that you've got there. Don't be afraid to experiment. That's very, very important. And do try things. As I say, I'm going to put the code up there. Do try the stuff. All you have to do is link it. I will try and put the databases up there too so that you can use those databases. Thanks very much for attending. I'm sorry that I could not be live demos. There was an issue with the GoToWebinar. I couldn't get the share my screen. I greatly appreciate your time and your attendance. And if you have any questions, do get hold of me, steve.simon@sqlpass.org. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Steve. Are there any questions? No, I don't see. All right. So you'll get an email at tomorrow or later today with the link to the recording and to the materials, and you can try all those things yourself. Thank you very much for coming. Have a great day. Bye, Steve. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.